People say money changes everything. But for Nathan Hale, one unexpected moment in his mansion's hallway would change more than just his heart, it would shift his entire world. Nathan was a man everyone in downtown Houston knew by name. Not because he wanted fame, but because he couldn't avoid it. Tech billionaire. Widowed father. CEO of Hale Dynamics. Behind his towering skyscraper and sleek black car was a man buried under grief, silence, and routine so strict they scared off anyone who dared get too close. His wife, Caroline, had died 6 years ago in a boating accident. Since then, Nathan poured his soul into work and built walls so tall even his own daughter couldn't climb them. That daughter, 8-year-old Ivy Hale, had cerebral palsy. Her legs worked differently. Her words came slowly. But her spirit, God, her spirit, could light up the darkest room. Nathan loved Ivy with everything in him. But love doesn't always look like warmth. Often, his love came in forms of scheduled therapy, private tutors, expensive doctors flown in from New York. What he didn't realize was that while he focused on fixing things, Ivy only wanted to feel something real. Which is where the cleaner comes in. Her name was Tessa Monroe. 25, recent community college graduate, and barely making ends meet. She wasn't supposed to be working at the Hale estate. She was covering a shift for her cousin, who had called in sick that day. Tessa had no business being around billionaires. But life rarely asks permission before rewriting its script. It was a Wednesday afternoon when it happened. Nathan had wrapped a call with a Singapore investor early and decided to come home instead of going straight to the office. The rain had begun falling lightly over the concrete as his driver pulled into the circular driveway. Inside, the mansion was quiet. Too quiet. Usually, Ivy would be with her therapist at this hour, practicing speech or mobility drills. But as Nathan walked through the grand hallway toward the staircase, he heard something strange. Music. Not classical. Not one of Ivy's soft lullaby CDs. But something playful. Something with rhythm. A 90s pop song, faint but unmistakable. He stopped. It was coming from the indoor sunroom. He moved silently, footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rugs. And that's when he saw them. Through the glass doorway, Nathan saw Ivy in her pink braces and sunflower pattern dress, giggling, twirling as best as her legs would allow. In front of her, holding both her hands gently, was a woman in a janitor's uniform. They weren't just moving. They were dancing. Not in pity. Not in practice. But in joy. Tessa spun Ivy carefully, counting each beat aloud, letting the little girl lead with unfiltered delight. Ivy's laugh bounced off the walls. And for the first time in what felt like years, Nathan saw his daughter truly alive. But his presence shattered the moment. He stepped into the room. The music stopped. Tessa turned sharply, panic rushing to her face. Ivy paused, her smile falling slightly as she clung tighter to the woman's hand. "I'm so sorry, sir," Tessa blurted, releasing Ivy's fingers. She asked me to play music and..." Nathan raised his hand. Not angrily. Just, stunned. He looked at Ivy, her cheeks still pink from excitement, and then back at the cleaner, who seemed ready to lose her job that very second. "What are you doing here?" he asked finally. It came out more confused than accusatory. "I was filling in today. For Serena. The other cleaner. I didn't mean to intrude." Ivy was in the sunroom alone and she asked if I knew how to dance, and I thought, her voice trembled. Ivy looked up at her father, then at Tessa. "She made me fly, Daddy." Something about those 4 words tore straight through the steel cage Nathan had built around himself. She made me fly. Nathan's eyes welled up, not that he'd ever admit it. He cleared his throat, nodded stiffly, and told Tessa to meet him in the study in 10 minutes. Tessa thought she was fired. Of course she did. She stood in front of his massive mahogany desk, hands clasped, bracing for the worst. But instead of raising his voice, Nathan asked her a question she never expected. "Would you stay? Just for the rest of the week? With Ivy? I think she likes you." Tessa blinked. "Are you asking me to babysit?" He smiled faintly. "No. I'm asking you to dance. Every day. With her." And that was how it began. What Nathan saw that day wasn't just a moment of laughter. It was a wake-up call. A reminder that all his money, all his control, couldn't manufacture what Ivy found in a simple twirl with a stranger. Over the next few days, Tessa became something more than a cleaner. She became Ivy's friend, and slowly, the bridge Nathan had long since burned began to rebuild, one song at a time. But things were never that simple. By the fourth day, the mansion staff began to whisper. Tessa wasn't a certified therapist. What if she hurt Ivy? The board members of Hale Dynamics caught wind of a random janitor hanging around the CEO's daughter. And one afternoon, Nathan's assistant forwarded him an article, tabloid garbage, accusing him of fraternizing with help. Nathan's world was one of reputation, contracts, power. Tessa's was one of minimum wage and late rent. The gap between them was a canyon. And Nathan was being asked to choose. He didn't know it yet, but the choice he'd make would not only change Ivy's life, but force him to finally face the truth he'd buried for 6 years. The weekend came faster than expected, bringing with it more than just rain and whispers. For the first time in years, Nathan canceled a board meeting. He stayed home. Watched. Listened. Each morning, Tessa would arrive with a fresh playlist on her phone and a flower tucked behind Ivy's ear. Sometimes it was a sunflower, sometimes a daisy. She called it their dance badge. Ivy would squeal with delight and insist her dad come watch, even if just for a minute. At first, Nathan hovered at a distance. Watching through glass. Listening from the hallway. But on Saturday, Ivy dragged him by the hand into the sunroom. "Sit, Daddy," she said firmly. "You have to clap when I spin." So he sat. And he clapped. And for the first time, Ivy stood up on her own without using the wall. She wobbled, braced her knees, and made a full turn. A tiny, uncertain spin. But a spin. Tessa didn't cheer like a teacher. She danced with her. Ivy's accomplishment wasn't treated like a medical milestone. It was celebrated as magic. Nathan felt something crack deep in his chest. He hadn't seen Ivy so brave in a long time. That night, after Ivy went to bed, Nathan invited Tessa into the kitchen for tea. She looked unsure, like she might be crossing a line. But he waved off her concern. "You're good with her," he said simply. "Ivy makes it easy," Tessa replied. There was a silence. Not awkward. Just heavy. Nathan leaned on the marble counter. "When my wife died, Ivy stopped smiling. I threw everything I had at it. Specialists. Schools. Trainers. But it didn't bring her back. Not really. And then you walk in, with a mop and a playlist, and she dances." Tessa looked down at her chipped nail polish. "I didn't do anything magic. I just saw her. I mean really saw her. You'd be surprised how much kids notice when they're used to being looked over." Nathan nodded slowly. "You're not just the cleaner anymore." "No," she said, gently. "I never was." The next day, he asked her if she'd consider staying longer. As Ivy's companion. Paid double. No cleaning duties. Just time, attention, and music. Tessa hesitated. "I'm not a therapist. I don't have letters behind my name." Nathan looked her dead in the eye. "But you have her trust. That's worth more." So she said yes. And that's when the real trouble began. A week into Tessa's new role, Nathan received a cold call from his firm's legal department. Apparently, several board members were concerned about personal boundaries and improper associations at his home. One even suggested he might be compromising Hale Dynamics' reputation by hiring a non-licensed, unvetted caretaker for his disabled daughter. "They're accusing you of favoritism," his lawyer said flatly. "Of making decisions with your heart, not your head." Nathan hung up without responding. That night, he walked into Ivy's room. She and Tessa were lying on the carpet, hands clasped, staring at glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. "Ivy?" he asked. She looked over, blinking slowly. "If Tessa had to leave, would you still dance?" The question seemed to sting. Ivy sat up. "Why would she leave?" "No reason," he said too quickly. "Just wondering." Ivy reached for his hand. "She helped me believe I could do things. Even when I fall." Nathan crouched beside her. He thought about the last 6 years. How he tried to be perfect instead of present. How he'd chased solutions and ignored connection. The next morning, he made a decision. He walked into the boardroom during their Monday meeting. The room was filled with suits and forced smiles. "I know there's concern," he began. "I know what it looks like. But I built this company by trusting my gut. And my gut tells me that little girl at home is finally healing, not because of our wealth, but because someone dared to care." A few board members exchanged glances. Someone muttered about protocol. Nathan cut them off. "I'm not firing Tessa. If that means I lose your favor, so be it." And just like that, he walked out. Back at the mansion, Tessa sat in the garden with Ivy, blowing bubbles and laughing so hard she had to wipe tears. She didn't know what had just happened downtown. She didn't know that a billionaire just risked millions to protect a bond money couldn't buy. Later that week, something extraordinary happened. Ivy danced. Truly danced. 3 steps. Then a spin. Then a fall, but she got back up. On her own. She looked at Tessa and beamed. Then she turned to her father. "I want to fly again." And Nathan, for the first time since Caroline's death, stood up. He held his daughter's hands. And together, all 3 of them danced. Not perfectly. Not professionally. But with love. And in that moment, the walls around Nathan's heart finally crumbled. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was a father again. And Tessa? She was no longer just a cleaner. She was the reason Ivy believed in joy again. Summer faded into fall, and with it came the subtle shifts that no one could have predicted. Tessa's role in the Hale household quietly evolved. What began as a spontaneous act of kindness became a daily rhythm, like breathing. She arrived at 9 a.m., often earlier, and stayed until Ivy's eyes grew heavy from laughter and movement. Her job had no title, no contract beyond a verbal agreement, but what it meant was clear to everyone inside the house. She was family. But outside the mansion's gates, the world kept spinning. Nathan faced quiet backlash. Investors grew cautious, not openly defiant, but hesitant. Media outlets picked up bits and pieces of the story. "Billionaire hires cleaner as daughter's companion," read one headline. "Unorthodox parenting or unstable grief," read another. The speculation never stopped. Nathan ignored it all. One afternoon, after Ivy had gone down for a nap, Tessa found Nathan on the back patio, sipping coffee and staring into the woods. "Do you ever miss the quiet?" she asked, folding her arms. Nathan tilted his head. "I think I used to be afraid of it. Now I kind of crave it." She sat across from him. The sunlight cut through the trees, scattering light across the table. "I got accepted to the dance therapy program at Western Arts University," she said softly. He looked up. "You applied?" "A while ago. Before I ever met Ivy." Didn't think I'd get in. Nathan smiled. That's incredible. I don't know if I'm going to go. He frowned. Why not? Because it's in Oregon. 2 states away. And I've already found my purpose here. Nathan's chest tightened. He looked away, afraid his face would betray what he was feeling. You should go, he said after a pause. You've earned it. But Ivy. She'll understand. And if she doesn't now, she will someday. Tessa nodded, but something lingered between them, unspoken, tender, and terrifying. That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. He walked past Ivy's room and saw her sleeping with the same flower tucked behind her ear. Then he walked to the sunroom, the place where everything had changed. Where music rewrote grief. Where joy returned. He picked up Ivy's favorite playlist and played the first song. It echoed softly in the room. He sat down, alone, and let it wrap around him like a memory. The next morning, he sat Ivy down. Sweetheart, he began, Tessa has a chance to go do something really special. Ivy looked at him, then at Tessa, who stood behind him holding her breath. Are you going away? Ivy asked. Tessa knelt beside her. For a little while. But I'll visit. And maybe one day, you can come dance with me on a real stage. Ivy's eyes filled, but she nodded. Then she stood, without help, and hugged Tessa around the neck. You helped me fly. Now you have to go teach other kids how to fly too. Even Nathan couldn't hold it together after that. The next few weeks passed like the final pages of a story you don't want to end. They danced every day. Laughed every night. Ivy improved beyond what any doctor predicted. She was walking short distances, stringing more words together, and her eyes shone with a light that could never be dimmed again. The day Tessa left, Nathan drove her to the airport himself. Ivy had made her a scrapbook, filled with Polaroids, glitter, and scribbled messages like, "Miss you forever," and, "Come back when I'm 10. As they reached her gate, Nathan hesitated. I never got to thank you properly, he said. You did, she replied, smiling. Every time you looked at Ivy like she was a gift instead of a problem. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a tiny music box. I had this made. It plays that first song, the one I heard you dancing to. In the sunroom. Tessa opened it, tears already forming. I don't know what this is between us, he added quietly. But I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him. Don't wait 6 years to feel something again, she whispered. He didn't. Months passed. Ivy started public school, with support, yes, but she walked into that classroom on her own. She made friends. She joined a music club. Nathan attended every meeting, every performance, even learned how to braid her hair, not well, but enough. The mansion didn't feel cold anymore. It felt lived in. It felt real. And then, one morning, a package arrived from Oregon. Inside was a letter. And a plane ticket. Come see what you started, it read. A few days later, Nathan and Ivy stood in a small theater. Dozens of children, some with visible disabilities, some without, danced across the stage with joy that filled every corner of the room. At the center stood Tessa, beaming, holding the hand of a boy in a wheelchair as they spun together in perfect rhythm. When she saw Ivy in the crowd, she mouthed, "You flew." And Ivy, without hesitation, whispered back, "So did you." As the lights dimmed and the applause thundered, Nathan reached for Ivy's hand and realized something profound. Love doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes, it begins in the simplest act, a song, a spin, a shared smile between a cleaner and a child. But what happens next? That's where the real story begins.